put this window over here so I can see it. And I do have the link to DEUS VULT. Is there anything else you want to plug? Oh, here we go. Hey, folks, we are live. I'm here with Jesse White. I think I'm going to have John Della Rose coming on in just a little bit. And what we are going to talk about, we're going to talk about whatever we feel like today.
Yeah.
But the main thing that I'm going to plug here is Jesse and John's new graphic novel called DEUS VULT, which is a Crusader fantasy. And let me go ahead and I'll just do a screen share. Do a, which screen? Yes, share screen. This one. There we go. All right, so here it is. Now, just to be clear, I do have some skin in the game here because I designed this logo.
Yeah.
And I also bought one of the splash pages.
Way to go. All right.
Sold out. Because I want like a big piece of inked art to put on the wall. I want some of Jesse's art. So there's a bunch of different tiers of stuff. The splash pages, which a splash page, if you're new to comics, I guess, or you're not familiar with comics terminology, splash page is something like this. That's like a page that's an entire thing. It's an entire drawing.
One panel.
Yeah, it's a single panel for a whole page, which just means that the art is highly featured on that page. Usually you're going to use splash pages for like really dramatic moments or big scenes that you really want to paint or draw, rather than like momentary things where you have a panel where like you're showing an action for a panel, like this crazy flying monkey guy getting just shot through the chest here by what are these things called? The big arrow shooters.
I think it's called a ballista.
Oh, ballista. That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. So that's lots of great scenes here. So anyway, you can check this out. There's a bunch of things that I like about it, besides this cool painted cover. And this is a variant cover by Sashi. If you don't follow her, she does a lot of these weird little pinup covers. So John usually has her do a cover, and people like those. And they're cool. But I like, this is inked in a traditional style. You use an ink brush.
Yeah, I use the old standard that they used to use in the old days. That's the Windor Newton Series 3.
So Windor Newton Series 3. Do you use any like nibs or anything like that for these like super details?
No, all the brush.
It's all
always the brush. Yeah.
Okay. Just curious. I know some guys use, you know, I like ballpoint pens sometimes because
really,
yeah, it's a ballpoint pen doesn't get these fine terminations on the end of a. So when you do something with the brush stroke has a termination that's small, so it gets big to small as you pull the brush off the paper. If you're using a ballpoint pen, it has like a round end. It doesn't do that. Mm-hmm. So if you're trying to get a line that has like a complete uniform thickness, no matter what, some guys use a ballpoint pen for that because then you get a complete uniform thickness no matter what. But I don't think it works quite as good as a brush certainly for a lot of this shading and things like that.
Well, it produces a different line. It's definitely a different line because you can press hard or press light and a pen will just make the same line. I mean, you can maybe make it sort of half-assed touch the paper, but a brush is responsive to the weight of your hand. You can tailor it to a very thin thing, or you can fatten it up depending on how hard you press in and out. If it's actually a ballpoint pen, as opposed to say like a fine line pen, which is like a felt, a ballpoint pen can actually shade like a pencil. Like you can actually start touching less and less and less. Like I'm talking like a big pen.
There's gray colors in there.
Yeah. Like a Bic pen that you would work with at elementary school. Those things you can shade with like a pencil. And you can actually have a big variegated distance or dimension of intensity in the mark. But a brush, it's on or off. It's on or off. So all you can do is thin or thick. But it's so expressive because you can also do sloppy or you can do kind of hatchy. I think it's the superior tool because it's very, very multi-user and it's more fine pointed than any pen can get. The little tip of the brush, if you can control it, you can do really, really small things.
Yeah, I've known guys who use, and my mom is an artist too, but we'll use for certain kinds of inking a brush that's just a couple of hairs, and you just pull the ink up off the hair, and you do just really fine stuff, especially for like, say, if you're painting a sculpture or a model, people are into model painting, you can get these like 3-hair brushes that you can get some really extreme detail with those things.
I use the method that I learned from John Buscema, which is that he uses actually a number 4, which is quite a large brush. But if you really get your dexterity up, you can just use the tip of it, like as if it's a 000. And then the benefit is that you don't have to dip as much because the number 4 holds a lot of paint in it, a lot of ink. Because dipping sucks, right? It takes all your time. That's all the thing about comic art is really, can you maximize the amount of time it takes you to make a rough idea into a picture? So even the little crossing the room to get a different tool becomes a factor. I made it so I could like reach half of a foot to get my thing, so I don't have to go across the room. And every little thing matters. Dipping into the brush, the reservoir, that's slowing me down. And you can't make money if you're just dragging it out, you know?
Yeah. And that's, I mean, this is something in my productivity book, I linked up at the top too, which is Keys to Prolific Creativity, which is a good book. If you're looking to, if you are new to your creative endeavor, or you're having trouble fitting it in your life, it's really good about creating your process that's going to fit into your life and how you value your time and things like that. Efficiency is really important when you get going. Efficiency is really important because you don't want to spend, you want to be on a timeline. You don't want to spend all your time doing things that aren't part of that creative expression. So as a writer, you don't want to spend a bunch of time, for instance, correcting spelling or grammar. So it's really either a program that can help you with that, like Grammarly, which is not the best, but if you know what you're doing, you can use it well, or hire like a copy editor to go through and find the double words and things like that for you. When it comes to comic art, the old masters could get things done very quickly because they just knew how to work efficiently. So didn't waste the time. Like Jesse said, they didn't waste as much time trying to get ink into your brush so that you can then put a couple marks. Imagine if you had to stop after every single, stroke you made. It would just take forever.
And you can go ahead. You can extend that to the thing that's often a debate amongst comic artists and people that are fans of comics, is the use of reference, or the common thing that we see is taking images from photos. That is just plain old slow. I mean, it's slow. If you can make up a horse, I've practiced like for years on drawing horses. You can make up a horse from any position, you're going to be faster than anybody that has to reference a horse. That's why doing it out of your head is better. It's not because you shouldn't copy or you shouldn't use reference. People get mixed up and they think, oh, reference equals bad. No, reference equals I don't know what it looks like. That's what reference equals. And that means slow. So the goal of knowing a thing and being able to draw it out of your head is not for some sort of highbrow elitist thing. It's actually for productivity, because it's too slow to sit there and have to reference body muscles and how to reference gorillas. You don't have the time for it. I drew in this comic well over 350 drawings. I mean, I see often in comics, people have like 3 panels per page. I did an average of 5 to 6 per page. And with all the page count in it, that becomes something remarkable amount of drawing. So the idea of having to reference each one of those pictures, can you imagine the time that would take, David?
Oh yeah, it would take forever. Think about, I mean, we can have the debate, but it's an artist like Ken Kelly. You guys don't know who Ken Kelly is. He does like Man-O-War covers and Kiss.
Yeah. Trained by Frazetta, actually.
Yeah, he's one of Frank Frazetta's students.
Like only students.
He's his only student? I thought
the one that was directly taught by him. Many imitators, but Ken Kelly was actually studied with him.
I'm a fan of Ken Kelly, but it's very obvious that he uses like bodybuilder references and stuff. They're very it's very focused on the accuracy of the
anatomy. Now I'm talking about comics, David, not about painting. I believe you should use a reference when you're painting because it's a lot harder. So I'm talking about comics, but go on with what you're saying.
Let's just look up some cool Ken Kelly art because it's such good stuff. Pull this.
He did things back in the day too. He did Kiss. I think he did Kiss Destroyer. Is that right?
Here's the heavy metal 40th anniversary.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
Cool. It's Christ pulling himself off the cross and killing all the Romans.
Oh, isn't that hilarious?
It's awesome. You know, so he does. I mean, a lot of this stuff is great. You can see the influence of say like this is actually Frazetta, I think. But it's so detailed with some of the anatomy. We won't show the butts and stuff. Like here's a Kiss cover.
Oh yeah, there's the Kiss. Yeah. And Manowar, of course, quoted that very cover with their one. Which Manowar is it? Is it Louder Than? No, that's way later.
I think it's Kings of Metal.
Kings of Metal. That's what it is. They quoted that very cover. Yeah.
Manowar album. It's Kings of Metal. It's just got so many classic tracks on it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like King Kelly. I also like the one for Gods of War. We'll look it up. Which is just a great album.
Yeah.
Let's find a bigger image. There we go.
That's good. Yeah. That's cool. I like those actually shadowed faces because it looks like more like a mask than sometimes it just looks like a confused face. Like you can see on some of his paintings of Manowar covers with the shadow face, it doesn't quite work.
Yeah.
Oh, we got boobies.
Yeah. Maybe we'll lose monetization. Who cares? All right. You guys are adults. You can handle it. It's fine art.
It's fine art. Yeah.
So yeah, I love this cover because it's just again the details and the demons and the boobs and butts and boots and everything. It's just great. And he always puts like this oily sheen, like they're stepping out on a bodybuilding stage.
You know, the thing about reference, which I'd actually like to say here, is that there is a lot of looseness in this painting. I mean, it's not tight like a lot of people's are. You can actually see guys that are way tighter than this. Like Boris Vallejo, for example, is like definitely, I met this guy in the gym and this is the mullet that he had in the 80s. And it's like exactly the same. Like those kind of images are definitely photo refed. That Ken Kelly didn't actually look too tight to me.
Probably started with, I mean, like some basic stuff here.
Yeah.
You can kind of tell like with the way the shoulder joint is here, it's very slightly off, but it doesn't really notice that. You just kind of go with it.
Gives me the feeling of being invented.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's a photo ref with an invented background. You know, those backgrounds that's nothing to slouch at. That's wonderful. I mean, it's tremendous, but go ahead.
I know an artist that will like the backgrounds, like you kind of have to know your weaknesses. So they'll use refs for backgrounds. In other words, they'll maybe create like a really cheap and easy photo composite of the elements they want, and then use those as a reference to make the background because it's hard to paint. Sometimes it's hard to paint perspective, depending on what kind of drawing you do, or like getting the figure correct with the perspective.
You mean figure ground relationship?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is very hard.
This one's easy because it's just the figure and the background's really in the back. But if you're placing figures within three-dimensional spaces, sometimes it can be a little bit tough.
Especially organic things versus like man-made things. If you've got, you start an eye of this type of fantasy painting, you're going to see very, very few structures in the background. You see pillars, maybe a hint of a plinth or something like that. But mostly you'll see sort of colorscapes and fields and sort of things like mountains. You know, traditionally, scenic painting is the lowest of the paintings in its hierarchy of difficulty. The traditional painters in the old days thought a scenic painter was the most low because it's really quite easy. You don't have to actually involve yourself with really intense perspective because a tree can be various sizes. Do you see? But for instance, if you're putting a figure in it, then the relationship between the figure and the tree has to become something real. And that's why a lot of the backgrounds of these things are just mountains and stuff. It's quite easy to make them up. Like Bob Ross makes up a fantasy mountain every time you pick up the brush. Yeah. Every single time. 30 minutes.
Yeah, my mom used to paint a lot of landscapes. I have a bunch in my house still. And it was funny because she had a bunch hanging in her house and people come through when she was trying to sell her house and they want to buy the paintings and not buy them. So I mean the anatomical detail here it's very on point. It looks photo realistic rather than you see amount of style there.
This picture you've got here, this is a thing I've talked with couple of people on Twitter before, and it's an idea that Andrew Loomis always talks out, and I learned it from him. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. It would be difficult to prove in a live stream, But this picture is wrong. The woman that's there, that's an angel, is too big relative to those horsemen. If you're looking at it with an informed eye, and the way to figure it out is to cast lines back from her height to the vanishing point of the horizon. But she, in my eye, from the way I've learned, she looks like a giant compared to a variety of small horses. Can you see that, David?
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't look right.
Yeah, because it's also at an angle which obscures it. You notice that the camera points at an angle, so the whole thing is tilted a little bit to give the wrong impression. So it would be, she would have to be looking straight across at them. It should be either down here or
they should be smaller. Because it looks like that, because of the distance between she and those horses, it gives us the impression that she's giant and that the horses are small. And it's a mistake in the figure ground relationship. If you're interested in this, I have a blog that covers this stuff all the time. And I'm sure that by the end of this, we can put a little link, or you could find me on Twitter, and there's a link between my Twitter handle and my blog. It's a technical thing, a mathematical thing. And once you learn about it, you can't unsee it. Another one that I see, David, is that people, especially guys that are really interested in detail, blow this figure ground relationship when they put figures in the foreground and the background, and one of them is on a different plane. And if you actually could see below the bottom of the crop, it would have to be that this front figure is actually in a hole in the ground because he's too low. Have you ever seen that in a picture?
Yeah. I remember Eric Larson pointing this out actually to somebody who was a artist on Spider-Man, and he's famous for Image Comics. He was the editor-in-chief of Image Comics, I think, for a while. And I follow him on Twitter, but I don't necessarily recommend it because he's got full-on TDS, but he'll point that out when people ask for feedback. He's like, okay, well, this person looks like they're standing in a hole. It's like you need to move them up because all your vanishing points, he's way below him, so he'd have to be standing in a hole to look like that. Or is he
really quick
way stairs or something?
Yeah. For artists out there, really quick way to do it. You can hang them off the horizon line, crossing a point that's relative between the figures. And what this means is, let's say your horizon line is bisecting the picture. Let's say, let's do it really easy, right smack in the middle. Your front figure's eyes, say, cross the horizon line. Then whichever figure you put forward or back from that, receding or forward, their eyes also have to cross the horizon line. If you're starting to find that your figure in the front has his eyes at the horizon line, and then the figure that's further back is crossing through his chest, it gives the impression that the guy in the front is in a hole, because our horizon is our point of view. It's our reference point of where we see the picture. And to see this thing that's cropped like that gives us the sense that the hole in front of us, which is outside of the image, is where your front figure is. So hang them off the horizon line. That's how it works. You can pick any body part. It can be an elbow, it could be your chest, anything, but it has to be the same between each of the figures in the depth of field.
Yeah, I'm gonna show an example of this done wrong. I actually did a video on this. It's actually a good cover, mostly because of the colors used and the overall composition. But if you look, this person would have to be like standing on a hill and everybody else lower. There's no, like, the shoulders are all misaligned. It's their ankles, or you'd have to be like laying on the ground looking up at them, which is kind of a weird perspective. You don't see the horizon at all in this picture.
So what's error in this is this black guy in the back right. The horizon of this is their hips. Your eyes fall on that. The place that the horizon is their hips. So you can see that first lady's hip is pretty close to this guy to her right, but that's too high on him. It's about his waist there. Chewbacca there, the horizon's going through his rib, and the guy in the back, the horizon's going through his neck. So they're all on different planes. It's incorrect.
Yeah, but someone would like the composition with like a V, and they're like, oh, we'll have a V or something. And I think this is something that people make jokes, and now I'm going to make jokes about, like, graphic design. And what happens is things influence other things in the wrong direction sometimes. So photo composite covers, which I do for a lot of my books, not because they are better, but because they are way cheaper, start to influence the way that you would do a painted cover, because a photo composite guy would just stick a bunch of, just stick a bunch of models on the page and whatever, because it's not about the perspective. It's about the individual images, and then call it good. And then so somebody painting it is like, well, we have to duplicate this photorealistic style, and it's all, the composition's completely whack. I still think this is actually a really good cover for the other design elements, the use of colors, the fact that you have a 2-color palette and it's gold and teal. Those things look really good, and they stand out and they pop out, and they give and it's called Light of the Jedi. It has like the correct color scheme to set up somebody to read this book. It's probably a bad book. But
it's a really good point you're saying. I mean, the fact that it's incorrect doesn't mean it's not an effective cover, because we're used to things in a world now where images are so overused and done so many times that you can see things that are not even in a space. Like, think of those paintings that were done for movie covers, like for Indiana Jones. It's just like sort of an amalgam of various vignettes all put together. There's no vanishing point in that. It's just standing completely flat of different images. So that lexicon is part of our visual understanding now. And you can let a picture fit like this within a framework of that sort of panoply of images all laid on top of each other. I'm just using the concept of the proper horizon line for technical drawing when you're trying to draw something realistic. It doesn't mean it's a bad cover, though. I agree with you. I think it's a good cover.
Good for other reasons.
Yeah.
Besides, the technical execution of it. And what happens, I think, is people they focus on the wrong things sometimes when they're trying to figure out how to, say, market something to somebody, or what makes a good ad or what makes a good marketing material. People rebel against this. I know we're kind of going far afield from talking about DEUS VULT, but
this is fun though.
But there's a truth to it. Like, I say, well, this doesn't look like a sci-fi cover, but like, well, I want my book to stand out. The problem is people have become so used to a certain way of sci-fi covers looking. If you deviate from that too much, then they assume that the book is not in the genre they're looking for. They assume the book's in the wrong place in the store. And so they pick it up and go, where does this book go? That clearly doesn't go here. This isn't a science fiction book. Or they see it on Amazon and think that Amazon showed them the wrong book, and so they scroll past it. It's a weird thing where the homogeneity of ads and targeted ads and the way that you have book covers and comic covers go towards that means too much of a deviation from that confuses the consumer. The consumer's been trained to look for the same things over and over again, which is really bizarre. We didn't always have that.
So tell me, what's the elements that would make, let me just pick a random genre. Like, what would be the elements that would make a compelling, let's say, youth romance novel cover? What would you see?
Or like a youth romance versus we're talking something that's like, young.
Stephanie Meyer type thing. Yeah.
That would probably be, you'd probably want, you actually would want the female, a female pretty much front and center. And you'd want her to be, depending on the style of the story, you'd want her to be slightly distant from a male figure. You could have them be both large or both small. If you're going traditional romance, it's a lot easier because you just crop a guy's face right here and stick his abs there, and then just have a girl on the side, and that's your cover. And then your background can be whatever the setting is, whatever influences the setting. So if they're in the woods, there's like, let's say it's paranormal romance and there's like a werewolf, you have a woods background, and then you'd have a girl wearing dress that tells you when it takes place. So if it's modern, she'd be wearing jeans or something. You'd use colors like purple and pink. Like, it'd be very purple and pink. Maybe some reds or something you could get away with.
And photo comp, right? Not painting, not a painting, but photo comp.
Yeah, just a photo comp would look like that. And then you might have a guy with his face obscured, but showing some element that makes him attractive, usually his body. So in a tight t-shirt or something like that, it's probably what you'd have.
But they don't tend to go for paintings anymore. Is that true? Like, they go for a Photoshop thing.
Yeah, they usually do photo covers. And there's the reason that photo covers became a thing is because they're cheaper. It's way less, it requires less skill and less time to create a photo cover than it does to paint a cover.
Yeah.
So this Star Wars cover. This is a painted cover done by somebody who knows how to paint,
like a digital painting.
Yeah. I mean, it might be a physical painting.
It looks digital to me.
It looks kind of digital to me too.
Yeah.
There's telltale things that might make it not digital. If it's not digital, there tends to be a softness and
Yeah,
more
the
brush stroke.
blurring. Yeah, blurring in the hair and that sort of stuff. That looks like Photoshop.
Yeah, you're right. But yeah, anyway, it could be digital, and they know what they're doing when they do it. But that requires way more hours than you hire your designer. You give him $100. He already has a subscription to a photo service, like a stock photo service.
Yeah.
Pulls the photos off for the elements he wants and figures out how to arrange them and color codes the thing and puts the title text on, and you're done. And he's kind of an all-in-one guy because he knows the fonts, he knows the colors for the genre, he knows that kind of stuff. So it really started as a thing that's cheaper because you could make one for like $150. Name of the Wind, which is a super best-selling book at this point. When it originally came out, it had the cheapest, crappiest cover you could think of for a fantasy art. Somebody went to Photoshop, took an African savanna, and pasted a dude with a black robe and just colored over his face and just stuck that on the front. No perspective, nothing, no attempt to blend anything together. And then had the title, Patrick Rothfuss, Name of the Wind, kind of the letters kind of offset in a way that looks kind of cool. So that it was like a cover that you could make literally in 30 minutes or an hour. Someone probably did it on a Friday afternoon before they got off work. They're like, I got to get this crap done.
It's one of the talks that you give a lot that I really like. And it's a point that I think lots of people forget or don't know. Like these legendary cover painters that were painting in the 60s and the 70s, they also were working really cheap. They've been priced out of the market now that you could not possibly afford, say, like a Frank Frazetta type cover from a painter anymore. Because Frank used to do it for like a couple of $100, like way back. Super, super cheap.
So like this is an extremely cheap cover. This is literally a cover you could make. I'd have a video. You can make it with free software in a few minutes. It's a photo of a dude in a black robe. And if you didn't have one, you could just throw a sheet on someone and take a picture and then stick them on an African savanna. I think this is actually, I think, 2 photos. The way I would do it, and I remade it even better. So everything stuck together much better. Where I had different pictures for the clouds. So the clouds look better. I put grass over this guy. So it didn't just look like they cut and pasted on top of some grass. So it looked like he was standing in the grass, and I moved him. The perspective is okay here. It's kind of going through his shoulder, and then a tree, and the tree's just painted on too. You can totally see the outline. There's just like a black shadow there because this is from a different photo. They just pasted a tree onto a picture of like an African savanna and called it good, and then put some orange letters on it. And then before they did that, they just colored the whole thing blue.
Get this, David. I think that there's clone stamp being used in those clouds. Look at that around the K. Do you see similar tracks there? They look like similar patterns.
If the photo, because when somebody's taking, actually there is a clone tool. Look, there's the mountain here.
Oh my goodness, that's so phony. Yeah.
Right. I didn't notice that before, but you're right. So the clone tool is way faster. What I did was actually like create transparency of the grass and stuff so that it covered his feet. But yeah, if you're taking a picture of the scene, you probably take a picture of the stuff that's interesting, which is the landscape, not like a bunch of empty sky. But because the photo's like, the cover's like this, you really have to fill up the space somehow. I feel like my photo comp covers are better, but I don't have any like right here.
Yours are better. This looks derivative of yours, or it looks similar in a way that I think is like yours are good. Yours are better than that, but this is participating in what you do.
Yeah, Wise Man's Fear is even worse. Here, let me look up Wise Man's Fear is like way worse. Part 2 of the trilogy, which may never get finished.
Yeah.
I don't know. Patrick Rothfuss is lazy. I'm just going to call him lazy.
What year is this?
Oh, man. When did it come out? 2008? Wow. It's been 13 years since he started the series.
That's a long time.
Now, I felt pretty bad because my mother-in-law died, and she was a fan. And I haven't finished all my series.
Oh,
This
that
one's
one.
even cheaper. So this one, they did the exact same thing. And he's even semi-transparent here.
Yeah.
You can like see the clouds through him. It's just a worm's eye picture of probably a street in, like you can see like modern stuff on it, modern like burglar bars. Probably a street in Italy somewhere.
Yeah.
Or like in Spain, somewhere where there's still kind of this old tile architecture.
Yeah.
And that's cover.
Boy, that's fast.
Yeah, I'm gonna find. Let me find something else to pull up. I'm gonna pull up one of mine just to show that I'm better than other people.
Yeah.
Let me see here. Where do I have it? Got the DEUS VULT cover, which is good. I have too many things in too many different places. Let's see here. It's gonna be under F somewhere. Here we go. What do you write?
Which one are you going to get?
City of Silver, because it's basically this comp, but better. Here's the map. Nope. Yeah, I'll show you the paperback because I actually did like a wrap for the paperback, which is cool. Yeah, this is just a picture of a street in Italy that still had old architecture in it. And there was a manhole cover right here, and I just clone stamped that out, and put words over it so you don't notice it. So this perspective again is like it's slightly off here, but whatever. The tops of their heads kind of align. That's as good as I could do for this one. So it works okay. I had to hide his feet because he's wearing Converse sneakers.
Oh, you're kidding. Did you put the sword in his hand?
No, he had the sword. He had the sword, so I didn't have to put a sword in his hand, but he was wearing Converse sneakers, so I had to put him behind a different figure.
Why would they put that photo like that? Like, that's a terrible costume. Why would he wear sneakers in the shoot?
I don't know.
He deserves an elbow smash.
He looked appropriate enough. He's also wearing a hoodie, but people aren't looking that close, so it's fine.
Yeah. I like the moon and the sea. That's cool.
Yeah. So the moon is an artificial planet that I just licensed. I've made my own planets before. Like this cover is a planet that I just made in like Photoshop.
Oh, that one's a cool one. Yeah.
Show this one. We'll remove this. So this one, yeah. So that's like a planet I made in Photoshop out of like a NASA satellite shot of Louisiana.
That's cool.
And then I just wrapped it into a sphere and it made it look like a weird planet. So it's a weird planet. And I colored again, everything is, you perceive it as black and white, but it's actually tilted towards green slightly.
Sure. Slightly
green. You'd actually I don't know if this is true for you painting, but you don't usually just use black and white or like grays. Rather, you mix black into a color to get your grays.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the laws of painting is that you don't paint anything twice until you've painted everything once, because colors relate to the colors beside them. So if you go right there and you put some red down, and you think she's going to have a red dress, and you paint the rest of the picture, your red might end up being so loud it doesn't work. So her dress might, in the final pass, if you paint them all one by one, be actually brown. And this is why artists use these little see-through things. It's like a little image, something like a piece of paper which has a hole in it. You look through it, and you can then just see the color by itself. And you're like, my goodness, that's not red. That's totally brown, actually. Do this with yourself. You can do it with your fingers. You look at a tree, and you see that tree bark. Oh, what color is tree bark? It's brown. You look at it like this, and you're like, wait a minute, that's gray. It's actually not brown at all. If you went and painted that brown, you'd be like, that doesn't look right. It looks wrong, and you wouldn't know why. It's because you picked the wrong color. Yeah.
So anyway, I pull a lot of the colors out, and because you pull the colors out, you don't see the fact that these clouds I drew them using a brush basically. And there's like 15 different photos that I like stuck together to make this. The lightning along with I cut the lightning out of one thing, and then I used a bunch of effects to, just to add color behind them. So it seems like the lightning is flashing. I used a mask to just take out the color effect there. So that's the real colors that, as the photo originally was that color. And I pulled all the color out and made it green to get these sorts of effects. So this is a better photo comp simply because it's just better. Like I put more effort into it. I actually shaded this character rather than having it be just pasted on top of a background. So I spent a lot more time on this cover probably than the Name of the Wind cover, and it's better as a result. But and then I also spent time like making the texture of the letters and stuff. So you get this kind of pop on something like this.
I like how you do that texture. I don't know how you do that. One day you got to show me that. I love it.
It's in Photoshop as like, it's one of the tools, one of the effect tools in Photoshop. But if you aren't doing it right, it looks awful. You have to really tinker with it a lot. There's lots of effects in Photoshop that you can get that look great, only if you do them one particular way. And otherwise,
I don't know the program well. And what's worse about it is when I go to talk about it, I actually can never remember what each of the functions are named, because I know where they are when I touch the thing and I put the drop down, but I'm like, what is this thing called? Is this like Dodge? Or it's like I never learned the proper way to use the program, because I don't do it very much. Like we were saying earlier about the comic, I do it by hand, not by the computer. I'm too old for that. I don't understand it.
And I think it's better. You can't get digital brushes cannot duplicate what a real brush does. I'm just going to show a better Wise Men's Fear cover. This is the newer cover. So once it had made a bunch of money, they went back and said, okay, we'll pay for like a painted cover, but it's not even really, a good one. It's not particularly good.
It's not great. It's not bad though.
It's not bad. It has a good feel to it. The colors, with these kind of orange leaves and the green back looks good, and his orange hair and good like lighting effects. This is digital, definitely, yeah. So, but it's good. It's much better than the original, like this of just the stock photo.
David, tell me, what's the rule, or if there's even a rule, whether or not the author's name goes on the top or the title goes on the top?
It's no rule. It depends what you want to brand, and there's no rule for top or bottom. So if you're doing, say, like a Stephen King book, the brand is Stephen King. You really want to lean on the fact that it's a Stephen King book. So you want Stephen King really big, and then the title smaller. If the author's less well known, or the brand is attached to the title more, even though J.K. Rowling is a big time author, anything that's Harry Potter is going to come out with Harry Potter being the biggest thing, because the brand is really Harry Potter, not the author. So it just depends what you're wanting the consumer to really pay attention to. What I find funny about Patrick Rothfuss's first book is that they were just kind of duplicating a Stephen King kind of paperback design. They made Patrick Rothfuss's name really big, even though nobody knew who the hell he was when the book came out. I think they were just trying to fill up space in there. They're like, we'll just put the name at the top, name here. People won't notice that I just pasted 3 images together. Yeah,
totally. And then, like, you can take the case of our friend Alexander Helene, who's got his book that I did the cover for, and it was about Rush, and that put the title up top, because Rush is the draw, not the title particularly, but the band Rush itself is the title. So that's why whoever did that graphic design put the title, from the Rush song on the top. And I think that makes perfect sense to me. So you put the biggest draw on the top. That's the goal.
The biggest draw is. So, like with if you're doing like a band album cover, it's usually going to be the band name.
Yeah.
So, one of the most classic album covers of all time just says the Beatles.
Yeah, that's a total con. We had to do this thing in art school when it was back in high school, and we had to draw a record cover. That's how old I am. And we had records, and I pulled a fast one, and I did the Beatles White Album, and the teacher was like, well, that's kind of a rip-off. I'm like, oh, well, you said an album cover. Isn't that a cheap rip? That's what I did.
Yeah, and that is here's Indiana Jones. This is like the VHS. I had the VHS back in the 80s, and this was it.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. No example of Horizon, nothing. It's just a panoply of images. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love this old style of movie paintings. That's how Frank Frazetta got his start, was doing movie posters. And if you see his early movie posters, you're like, that's Frank Frazetta, because he didn't always he didn't have to draw in that very almost emotionalist fantasy style that he's popular for now. He could draw on lots of other styles.
Yeah.
I'll probably find one here. Frank Frazetta, I think, is a rather inspiring guy as well. He had a stroke.
Yes, he did, and he had to paint with his other hand for a while.
Learned to paint with his other hand. Apparently, he did a movie poster for From Dusk Till Dawn.
Yes, he did. Yeah, it wasn't used. Yeah, it's
really
featuring Salma Hayek really big in the middle. He did the cover of Escape from New York. He did Mad Max. He did Orca.
Dude, I love the Mad Max cover. It's just like,
yeah,
he hits it.
Yeah. You know? He also did this Clint Eastwood movie where he's in a bus, and the bus is driving really fast through this town, and his wife's in it. I forgot what it's called. It's a 70s movie.
Oh, here we go. Here's one of the ones that got him his start, which was the Hotel Paradise.
Oh, yeah. He did that, yeah.
And so you would see this now and be like, well, that's Frank Frazetta, but he could do lots of things. He was actually very versatile.
Yeah, it's his cartoon style. Well, he cut his teeth with Wally Wood working and doing all of the, he did the Little Abner for the longest time when he was a younger guy, and he would like basically ghost him, and he would draw the work and not get the credit for it. All the Little Abners in the early were Frank.
Yeah. I think this is a Frank one too.
I've never seen that one.
Yeah, it's just he did a lot of cartoony stuff for like movie posters that people don't really remember. He did Barbarella, I think. Imagine, I gotta find a better. Is this big enough?
I could have sworn Boris Vallejo did Barbarella. Frank did that? I'd be surprised.
No, you're right. Did Barbarella do that one?
I don't know.
Anyway, I like it, so I'm going to look at it.
Yeah, I like it too. Yeah. Looks like Boris to me.
Yeah, but it looks really cool.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think Boris did Flash Gordon, I think.
Oh, Flash Gordon. Luana. There's so many good ones out there.
Yeah, it's the classic. I wish that existed still, that world. Boy, it just used to make me go just totally drawn into another world just looking at pictures like that. You go like, what?
Now, what's really good. I mean, what I find so strange to me is like you have photocomp covers for like a movie like Alita Battle Angel, like a $200 million movie.
Yeah.
It doesn't cost that much comparatively to have a legitimate artist create a good poster for it. But it's one of these things that self-perpetuates, is that people are used to photo composites. And so the marketing geniuses think that everything has to look the same, or people or won't work. You want to do what works. So you just, that's the problem with like, well, we need to do what works. Then you'll never do anything that's exceptional.
It's a trap, and I see a lot of guys, people, even the guys that I really admire, that are so keyed into this thing that's going on, and they want it to be their version of it. It's just a duplicate of the one that already worked on Indiegogo, and they just really drive this hard. And they say, well, they know what's really key is this 90s style. And I think that's actually the wrong thing to do. If you see something that's working, I think what you should try to do is not defy it, but you should try to invest something into the paradigm that's being popularized and being used currently, but it is not identical the same, because why would people want it? It'll only work for a certain amount of time if you're the clone of it, and then it'll be dead. And not to mention, no one will remember you in the long end.
Yeah, people aren't aware of these long-term trends because they haven't been in the business that long.
Yeah.
But these trends pop up, and what happens is there's like a black swan, like something just explodes and is popular. And then it just becomes a game of trying to copy that. And the game really fell into this a little bit more than 10 years ago. And the entire reason is targeted advertising. I shouldn't say the entire reason. That's the main reason. The reason that trumps all the other reasons is targeted advertising, because what you used to have to do in advertising, I had a whole Twitter thread on this the other day that I wish more people would take to heart, because you got to know this stuff if you're gonna make moves in the modern world. used to be you have to get people's attention. You know, they're walking through the supermarket and maybe they see your ad and that gets their attention and they think about your product. Well, it has to be attention getting. That means it has to be original. And so if you look at some of these older, you know, these older, let me open image in, let me get this one. Here's another, I think this is another Frazetta one. Like this would get your attention walking through a big thing of pink, a bunch of goofy stuff. And then you'd pay attention and think about maybe that's something that, you know, that I want to go watch, because there'd be all these movie posters. People are surrounded by advertising. For the most part, it's noise. With direct advertising or targeted advertising, basically, I already have the person's attention. Getting their attention is not that important. They have to watch my ad in order to watch the YouTube video. They have to scroll past my ad to see what their friend's status are. It's all about social media. And because you have a profile, user profile on that person, you know what they've clicked on before, and you know what they've said that they like on their Facebook profile. And there's a whole little profile of what this person liked before. And so the game is to signal as hard to the person's pre-existing tastes as possible. Here, you like Star Wars. Here's the thing that's just like Star Wars that you're also going to like. You like, do you like hamburgers? Try this hamburger place. You know, you like tacos because you've checked in at this taco place, then you're going to buy our tacos, whatever it's going to be. So it's targeted towards what somebody's already done. What's the flaw in that? If you're targeting what people already like, you're never going to be able to make anything that they will like that they don't know about yet. Old advertising used to be about, here's a product you never knew you needed.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's, here's a product that's just like the other product you bought.
You see, we were just talking off screen about this before the stream began in regards to where people live. And I told this anecdote about a man to me earlier in my life. A friend of mine said he didn't need to go anywhere else to know that he loved where he lived. And I said, well, if you don't know what you're referring to or what you're relating it to, your choice is actually just arbitrary. It just happened to be where you were born. And so what you're saying, David, is the same thing, in that if you've never seen a thing, like what is the example you gave? You gave wasabi and a hamburger, right? If you've only eaten hamburgers and everything that's coming towards you and down your channel is about hamburgers, you maybe never know that you like wasabi better than hamburgers because you've never gone there. And it's nothing that's ever going to cross your path. Isn't that just the same point, eh?
Yeah, that's it. So absolutely, that's it. That's what that's what I'm getting at. And so all of the in art, all of the positive black swans are things that were not anticipated ahead of time. That's what made them black swans. Mm-hmm. Because if people knew that, like, I don't know, if people knew that Thriller was going to be like the biggest album of all time, there'd be a lot more people making music exactly like Thriller at the same time Thriller was made. But they weren't, because, you know, they just weren't. They were doing other things that they thought would be successful. Mm-hmm. You know, you see a trend, what happens is somebody starts the trend, and then the trend dies because people just copy each other to freaking death.
Yeah, music is a perfect example of this. I mean, you can see all those bands from Los Angeles, those hair metal bands towards the end of the 80s were basically derivatives of one another. Mm-hmm. And so what became the Black Swan? We're going to go anti that. We're going to go anti-virtuoso. We're going to go anti-image. We're going to go anti-skill. And that's why all of that stuff crashed, because people wanted to see something different rather than the same. And I'm not going to say that Kick Axe or, you know, Poison or any of those bands are better or worse than one another. They're all actually very good. They're certainly skillful. But what people wanted to see was something different a little bit. And I think that sometimes it goes the wrong direction, you know, because different doesn't mean good.
Yeah. Different can be bad, but it's novel. It's the point is that it's novel on some level. So the paradigm that rewards iterative change and shuns disruptive changes. You'll notice that these disruptive changes, and Bradford will know about this, that they kind of cease after the 1990s. At the end of the 1990s and going into the 2000s, you end up in a period of continual artistic stasis where there's very little new that comes out. And what is new that comes out is merely a reiteration of a previous trend that just gets forgotten. Like, I don't know if you remember Mumford & Sons. Mumford & Sons was this pseudo folk band that was popular for like 6 weeks, it felt like. They were all over the place for 6 weeks, and then they just became obscure again because people got tired of that. Like, oh, this is slightly different than the things we've heard for 10 years. Oh, but it's really not that different. And then you just get tired of it and stop listening to it. And that's what happens. So you end up in a stasis, and targeted advertising is part of this, because there's no like, you're kind of cutting off the avenues where you'd have a disruptive, explosive thing happen. But still, they do happen. There's something that could be explosive or disruptive that happens. And then everybody copies that trend until it's just no longer profitable. The people who, let's say you get some readers interested in books because they liked Twilight. A lot of people who hadn't read a lot of books read Twilight. Young girls, adults that weren't big readers got into Twilight for whatever reason. I think most of Twilight's popularity is from people who didn't read a lot of books. I've talked about Twilight on the channel. I don't think Twilight is bad. It's not technically a bad book or anything. But it's definitely directed towards like 12, 13-year-old girls. That's just the market for it. And the fact that it went outside that market is really the anomaly. No one predicted that. They just thought it'd be a little vampire book for 13-year-old girls, and it exploded outside of that. So then what happens is, we know that, Denise Johnson, age 32, from Point Place, Michigan, likes Twilight. So you just show her a bunch of ads for books that are exactly like Twilight. And at first she reads them because they're like Twilight, and she knows that she likes Twilight. It's a safe choice. But then she gets bored and just stops reading. Or reads the next trend. Oh, it's what was the other one? The Hunger Games. And then she gets a bunch of books marketed that are like the Hunger Games. And so these trends just happen. Big book pops up, big series pops up. We just got John here, so let's add him to the stream. Big book pops up, everybody copies that until the trend dies, and then another trend pops up and you hop on that and just try to do that into the ground. For me, I have to be original to be happy as a creator. But I also know that if you really want to make waves, you have to throw a lot of shit at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah.
A lot of different stuff. You got to be original. It's okay. I only worry about marketing after I finish work. Other people start with the marketing in mind. Like, who am I going to market this book towards? I do the opposite. I write the book that I give a crap about, because I can do lots of things for money. I can always go back to farming if I want to make. I can make more money farming than I can writing books, for sure.
Yeah. There's our man. Hi, John.
Hey, Jesse. I've never seen you before. You look like Mr. Spock.
Oh yeah, thanks.
Yeah, we got the sort of like the hair.
Oh yeah, the straight bang. Yeah. That's what I do. Just cut it straight across.
Nice. So yeah, to your point, David, I 100% agree with you, and that's kind of my philosophy, is just throw as much as you can out there. That's the pulp philosophy. I mean, that's what we're kind of all about around these.
Robert E. Howard, man.
Yeah. I gave an analogy on this on Twitter, and I think it's a pretty good analogy. People don't understand the algorithm, and people get very heartbroken and confused when they're not successful and they don't know how to market things, and they just haven't learned how to do these things. So people start up a YouTube channel and they're like, no one's watching. Where's my? It's like, well, there's more to it. You've got to start by making the content, but there's more to it than that.
I made mistakes for a couple years on that. I got very mad, and I'm like, why does everybody talk about the Star War? And then I was like, okay. And I watched my YouTube. It's like every periodically I'd make a video about like how I hated Star War or whatever, and I'd get a bajillion clicks on it. And I'd be like, dang it, I don't want these clicks. I want better clicks. But the truth is, I just want to bring as many people as possible to whatever format possible, so that they look at DEUS VULT and they are reminded by DEUS VULT, and they see it 5, 6, 7 times. And one of those times they're going to click on it. I don't really care what gets them in the door. It's not my place to judge people. And that was my bad for a couple of years. And now my YouTube's really taken off because I've just kind of abandoned that stuffiness. And it is a stuffiness at the end of the day.
Yeah. So, I mean, I try to have a balance. Like if you're going to do content like that, do like one video on the Star War, then you need to do a couple on other things that are kind of deeper level stuff, longer tail. Like here's a thing that's on like for more specific people and then that's how you get people that really like your content. Like, oh, I really liked how you broke this down. It made me really understand this better and maybe you get 100,000 views on your Star Wars video and you get 1,000 on this other one, but the 1,000 views on the smaller one can make a bigger impact because those are people that actually like buy your book, for instance.
Absolutely.
And so it ends up being a more important marketing tool. But anyway, I liken it to a pawn. And so the way the algorithm works is the algorithm is like an amplifier. Imagine it as an energy amplifier. So someone drops a pebble in a pond, and if you imagine a pebble drops in a pond, it makes a little splash, and the waves are kind of high right where it drops, and then the ripples spread out across the pond to where by the time they get to the other side, the energy is almost gone. It's just like a slight disturbance of the water. Well, what happens with an algorithm is that it's an energy source that rather than the waves becoming dissipated due to entropy, they become amplified. So you're standing on the other side of the pond and the waves are splashing all over you. And you're like, someone must have thrown in a really big rock, or they must have done something really important on the other side of the pond. And you go look, and no, it was a pebble, and no one knew that was going to explode that way. So what happens is people go over there and they start throwing all their rocks, as big rocks as they can, into the pond to try to duplicate these waves that were washing over the shore. And they're like, why doesn't it happen? And meanwhile, they're getting hit with waves from the other side. Like, well, maybe it's over the other side right now. It turns out the algorithm, because it's not a human thing, it merely amplifies popularity. Someone gave an example. I think it was Brian Niemeyer gave this example. You had a Dinosaur Jr. song, I think, ended up in like the top 20 because some guy posted an illegal rip of a Japanese game show that had it, and people were clicking it for some reason because it was a really amusing clip. And because it got so many clips and it was in that clip, the YouTube algorithm was like, I guess this is a hot song, and started recommending the song to everybody.
Isn't that crazy?
So seeing that song in their feed, and eventually it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. It just exploded. It's like, this song must be very special. This song is not special. It's a random event. And because it's a random event, people start to make the big mistake of thinking that random events are from special circumstances. There's something so special about this viral content. No, it was random. So how do you harness randomness? Well, you throw a lot of pebbles in a lot of different places, and one of them takes off. So someone asked me, how do you duplicate, how did you know that like this video was going to get 500,000 views? I'm like, I didn't. I thought it would be okay. I thought it was like a good moment to make the video, but I didn't think it'd get 500. I didn't know how many views it would get. It's like, how did I made a video on like, don't use Gillette razors. I'm like, use straight razors, and boom. So I had a video on straight razors. It exploded, right? It became like, for my channel at least, became pretty viral, got like hundreds of thousands of views. How'd you know that content was going to be like the content that people should watch? I'm like, I didn't. I just thought I'd throw a pebble in the pond, and the mystical energy source decided to amplify it. It's you're basically looking at spirits that you can't control.
So considering this idea of throwing all these pebbles, David and John, both of you guys want to weigh in this question. Like Robert E. Howard used to write stories and then re-release them if they didn't work out, and change them and basically keep the same story. So throwing a lot of pebbles, he's basically reusing things again and again, and even sometimes duplicating them in later stories. What do you think of that as an idea? And is that legitimate in an art way? I mean, do I take pictures from other projects and maybe say, it's something like this, and maybe I copy that exact picture so it's faster? Is that legit, or is that phony?
I think it's your thing. I think there's it's definitely lower effort. I'm going to talk about I don't like to do this too much, but there's a comic artist named Greg Land, kind of infamous. And he's kind of infamous because he uses refs to the point of absurdity, and even traces his own art that he's done before. So we'll just look at this example here. Let me share it on the screen here. Add to stream. There it is. Pull Brad's comment off here. Oops. Look at this. So literally it's not even just the same. It's the same composition reused several times, just recoloring the same posed figures to be different costumes.
So that's beyond Robert E. Howard using the same story and resubmitting it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, definitely.
Robert E. Howard, I have no problem with him I think the classic example is the death of Kull and the birth of Conan. Conan was born from a Kull the Conqueror story called By This Axe I Rule. Mm-hmm. And the publisher rejected it because he thought Kull was not a very good character. Kull was this brooding, dark sort of character. And so he just redid the story because he liked the plot and just put in a different character named Conan and became the Phoenix on the Sword. I think it became Phoenix on the Sword.
Yeah.
It's the same story, but you swap in a different character with some different dialogue, and all of a sudden the publisher publishes it and it takes off. I don't really have a problem with that. Obviously, Robert E. Howard has had a lot to do, and also had believed in that story enough that he's like, well, I'll change the one thing the publisher didn't like, and then we'll just go with it. Let's do it again.
Yes. Yeah, that's the easy way to do things, especially if you're getting published. At this point in the Amazon game, there's not too much of a need to do that. You can leave your story out there, and you can actually make tweaks to the story later on if you need to. I've actually done that. I've gone back and with my steampunk series, I knew that I became a much better writer with books 2, 3, 4, 5. And so what I did was I went back and did a complete re-edit of book 1. I added a couple, it wasn't, I don't know that I added a lot of plot, but I changed a couple continuity things. I changed a couple, just minor things here and there just to add to the flavor and make the flavor a lot better. And I just went back and I just resubmitted the book. And so now new copies of book 1 are a lot better than book 1 was, 4 years ago.
Do you keep selling them both together, or does one get struck from your?
I got rid of the first one because I thought the new one's just better. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that's really important, I think, and I think maybe you guys can acknowledge this to be true too, is that artists don't live in a vacuum, right? You can't sit there and create from nothing. You have something that's influencing you all the time, even if it's an unconscious thing. And those kind of phenomena that, this guy, for instance, he maybe is doing it quite strongly, but I don't get down on people as much because it's a very hard thing to do. And I'm certain it's true in any sort of discipline where you're creating things out of nothing. You're not even certain sometimes where the influence is affecting you, and you might be quoting a thing and not know that you're quoting it because it's so deeply immersed into your psyche. So
absolutely.
I don't know, you agree with that, guys?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for
happens
sure.
all the time.
Yep.
I've definitely gone back and somebody's told me, this plot point is obviously from Babylon 5 or whatever, and I'm just like, oh, well, I intended that, and I totally didn't, right?
Mm-hmm.
That happens all the time. Something in art I notice is what I really hate in modern comics. There's this like female open-mouthed angry face where they like should bare their teeth like they're angry. That's not quite it. It's getting
go down.
close to
I
it.
saw it. Go down.
You know what I'm talking about?
Right there, the blue one.
There it is. And it's like the female equivalent of soy face, and it's just like they look so masculine when they do that. I hate it. So many comic artists use this expression like to excess. Like every picture will have this exact same face. It's like you're not making her look grittier or cooler. You just make her look like she's, I don't know. I don't want to look at her.
Yeah.
I saw this comment, which is a good one. As a musician, it's hard to say a song is ever done. Yeah, that's why it's good to have deadlines. And I have to talk about this in the Keys book. It's like if you're working on a deadline, then you have a line where you're like, I'm done now.
Yeah.
I am done. And I, as a musician, especially because I do the production side and everything too, versus like going down and sitting with the producer and the producer saying it's done. It's like I could just. Maybe the guitar needs to be slightly louder in this moment. You go back to the masters and then you'll be there all day trying to tweak the mix slightly. And then at the other side of it, nobody notices what you did. It's
exactly true, David. I mean, my first record with my heavy metal band, which we just basically did ourselves, we just tickered at it for, I don't know, a better part of 2 years. And then we got a record label deal and we had to produce it in like 6 months. It was like almost impossible. We had no preparation for it. It's like we were basically babies again, trying to figure out what to do. Super hard.
Yeah, it is. It is like that. So it's good to have deadlines. I think it's good to work on a schedule because there is, the reality is that when it comes to perfection and things like that, it's perfection within a manageable time frame. Mm-hmm. And professionals get shit done. They don't just sit on things for years waffling over whether it's perfect or not. It's never going to be perfect. You want it to be at a good enough standard that people like it and it's good, but you can't pretend that you're going to be able to make something absolutely perfect, or you're going to drown yourself trying to fix little things. And then you end up making things worse. And this is the thing about over editing a book. People will edit the same book for like 6 years, and then they're putting things back in the book that they took out before. And it's like, you're on a fool's errand at that point.
Yeah.
You need to figure out what version of the book is what, and just
there comes a point in editing where you really take the life out of things too, where it's just not, there's no emotion to it anymore. And if you have emotionless art, it's kind of pointless to begin with. It can be as polished as possible. I've seen a lot of unpolished stuff that just like hits that emotion and works way better than any sort of over polished work.
Yeah, I agree. And that's the thing that I like reading about the pulp era stuff, and why I like Robert E. Howard so much is that Robert wrote on a deadline. So did guys like H.P. Lovecraft. And because he wrote on that deadline, he had to have stories shipped on time in order to make his living. There's little rough things here and there. There's things that maybe would be caught by an editor today, like awkwardly worded sentences, but it doesn't really matter because the core of it is there. Like the core quality of what makes the story memorable and good is always still there. And in a lot of cases, I think it's better than what would be done today, where you'd have multiple editors go through pass-throughs and say like, oh, well, this might have, this, I want to do this way. Probably some of the more famous quotes that you can pull out of Robert E. Howard stuff. An editor would say, it's certainly a copy editor would say like, oh, you got to change this.
Yeah.
Into this Conan.
That Latinism, I think it's olet lucernum, which means it smells of the lamp. It means that you've spent so much time on it that the oil smell from your lamp is actually emanating from your art. It's like you worked too long on it and you didn't have the moment of inspiration. John, our very first conversation on the telephone was about this, wasn't it? We talked about how struggling with something for all the rest of your days doesn't actually produce something. It's got to be like in my blog that I referenced earlier. One of the posts, maybe the most recent one, was a thing I sort of worked from an idea of yours, David. I believe it was deliverables have to be fast and good, not just fast and not just good. They have to be fast and good, and that's the thing. I mean, that's why those guys in the marble bullpen in the old days, those guys were outrageously good because they never failed. They kicked it off and they always hit it out of the park. I mean, it's super, super hard.
Yeah, I think that was a lot of the, I think we need to reform Jim Shooter's image a little bit. Jim Shooter gets a lot of hate from, I think, the 90s fanboys because they listened to the artists that hated Jim Shooter because Jim made him do shit on time.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Jim was like, you got to sell. Not only this has to be really good and on time, and you're not selling enough copies because it's not good enough. If people were missing deadlines, it was a big deal back in the 80s because he was moving, on more popular titles like X-Men, he was moving 500,000 copies a month.
Mm-hmm.
People don't realize how many books were being sold in the 80s.
Yeah, you can't mess with that. And I agree. He did a lot of great things at Marvel, and almost everything that came out during that period is honestly a home run. I mean, they did a couple. They did some experiments too, like the new universe or whatever, which didn't quite work out. But everything was just beautiful. You also got to remember, like when you're talking about these guys who hit it out of the park and all that, and hit a deadline. Not only did they do that, but they were working. All these guys in the Marvel bullpen were working for 20 years prior to really their superstardom at Marvel, like perfecting their craft before they got there. I mean, Ditko worked throughout the 50s, Kirby worked throughout the 40s and 50s. They were all. Joe Kubert was working in the 50s also. I mean, so the stuff that you see of them in the 60s and 70s that you love, that comes from like 20 years of experience. You're not going to be able to do it overnight.
Yeah, I know. I had this on one of my videos. John Buscema, when he started Conan in 73 or 74, is the same age that I am right now. That's when he started. He's been working all of those years preceding, since he was working from the days of Timely. He'd been doing all of that.
Yes.
So you're sitting there, you're like, how is he so good? He's so good because he worked that full time for 30 straight years before he started Conan. It's like crazy. You look at his first work, you're like, that's actually pretty weak. Like, he's got this thing about the people that stole Abraham Lincoln's bones. It's some really odd comic. I look at that art and I'm like, oh my God, it's awful. Like,
he really didn't have his own style, nothing.
Nothing.
It's like, and you know what? I mean, you can, if you find the early stuff from most of the people you like, that's what you're probably going to be struck with, is like the flaws, because they weren't that experienced. They hadn't figured all that out.
Yeah.
Something I love, and I compare Jesse to John Buscema a lot, because on a technical level, it's very like John Buscema with the inks and everything. But there's lots of little subtle things that John would do that you don't realize enabled him to, finish a book a month without any problems.
Multiple 6 a month.
Yeah, we're gonna go monthly with DEUS VULT franchise, right? Right, Jesse?
I'm up to that. Yeah.
You notice that, like, this action panel, there's a lot going on here, but you don't waste time with the background. You just have Matt Krotz is the guy who did the colors.
Yeah.
So you just have Matt. It's just like a little splash of color in the background. You don't need to spend a lot of time on lots of detail.
That's a fine line, though, because if everyone, it's because I got a lot of flack on this on my first book, Flying Sparks. My guy was rushing that book pretty hard at the beginning, and he's gotten a lot better because he's received the flack now. But at the beginning, like he would do a page like this, and look, I mean, if you look at panel 3, it's got tons of background. If you look at panel 1, it's got a lot of background. So panel 2 and panel 4 can kind of your brain already has the setting for them, right? So you don't need to restate that, and that's what that would be if there was more detail there. But see, panel 5's you've got a wall there, and panel 6 you've got the settings in there. But you can get away with a couple different panels for the speed element and for just like focusing on the figure or action or whatnot.
Yeah, what's important,
and it's an important fine line. Yeah,
expression here.
Yes,
that's
what right. And the thing that John's saying is it's so essential, because it becomes too much if you do a picture that's full every panel. It's too much, because one of the things I think that a lot of young and naive, and I would even say a lot of professional modern artists fall into, is that they think a comic is a movie. A comic is not a movie. It's not even like a film sort of adaptation of a movie. It's like a completely different thing. And if you address it with full detail in every panel, it's too much to look at. You can't read it. And in fact, you end up finding yourself getting distracted by the art. That's not what you want to have. You want the story and the art to be kind of in dynamic relation and a bit of a tension, but you don't want to be sitting there getting glommed down by the art. And it's too flashy and it's too dense. It's hard to look at. I find it.
Yeah, really, you need that focal point. That's the most important part of any art. Yeah.
In comics, I have what's called the 2-second rule.
That's a brilliant rule.
So the 2-second rule is, if you can't figure out what's going on in the art in 2 seconds, if in 2 seconds the panel is not communicating the action, then there's something wrong.
Yeah.
Either it wasn't drawn correctly, or there's too much there. And so I've seen a lot of modern comics, they fail the 2-second rule. What was it? Fascist Frog. So I was looking at Fascist Frog. And there's all kinds of panels where I have to stop and stare at them for 10, 15 seconds, because I have no idea what Fascist Frog artist was trying to draw there, because it's too much. There's so much ink on the page. The colors are saturated. You can't tell what the hell's going on. Fails the 2-second test, which meant you needed to draw that panel with less stuff going on, or, with a better focal point of what's actually supposed to be going on. There's lots of examples of that in modern art or modern comic book art, at least, I think, that really, really hold it back. I think actually the modern colors can contribute to that as well.
It's hard,
Greg Land stuff. This is all modern color stuff. It's so, there's so much contrast. There's so much dark colors on everything.
We started with a modern colorist, and it was pretty funny. So I got a couple pages in, and Jesse's just like, no. He was ready to quit the book because the colors, and Matt Krotz is doing such a great job. That you made the right call.
Matt is incredible. And what I really appreciate about Matt, as opposed to other people that we've experienced, is that when I gave him direction and I told him what I was looking for, he didn't push back. He didn't get belligerent. He didn't even debate me. He said, let me see some images. So I showed him a variety of images, because frankly, I mean, I'm older than you guys, and Matt's even younger. And I think that that's a lexicon of imagery that they don't even know. They don't have that in their mind. So Matt studied what I was talking about, and I went through a long thing on Twitter, and I said, look at this picture from Conan, and you can see how often they just do a complete like monochrome. Sometimes it's one color for the whole panel. It's supposed to be a dramatic moment, or sometimes it's just edge lit. You know, there's no rendering. It's just a hard, you know, green for Hulk here, and then he's got a hard yellow on his edge. It makes you think that it's light, and it's because of the restrictions of what they could print in those days. But but like what I've often said, limitations on you makes you more creative, actually, because it gives you a handful of things that you can do, and then you start really thinking, you know. So Matt studied this. He took it really to heart, and he just produced, like, I mean, kicked it out of the park right away. And I was like, this guy's a great artist. I mean, he's a great artist already, but I was really appreciative of how much he took my vision and went with it and didn't try to argue and fight with me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anyway, more on modern colors, the way they get kind of this like almost photographic look is that their color is doing so much work in the drawing.
Yeah.
That you lose sight a lot of times of what exactly you're supposed to be looking at. Like with this, it's like, I don't know what this looks like Wolverine with some tubes, like Weapon X style, some guy with an open mouth, Deadpool.
I'm
maybe
just looking at the half naked girl. I don't even know what you're talking about.
I don't even know what's going on here. Right. So you lose track of a lot of the stuff that's going on. Or there was a really good one where it was like the background was just as strong as like this one. There's way too much in the background.
Oof. That's rough to look at.
I'm drawing background. Maybe 10% about of the time you'd spent drawing background. Pull a lot of that ink out, and then you could actually see that there's a figure supposed to be standing there.
Yeah, that takes a lot of work to look at what you're supposed to look at,
or something. And you know, and this is nothing against like Greg. This has a lot to do with the colors as well. And one thing I will say positive about Greg Land is he actually finishes his books on time and does act like a professional in that way. And that's why he gets so much work. People that hate Greg Land are like, how does he get so much work? It's like, unlike most of the artists in the,
he does his job.
He finishes his book. He views it as a job and he finishes it. And yeah, he swipes, but part of the swiping is probably to save him some time so he could have that photo quality art people want from Greg Land and get it out on time, knowing that a lot of the fans are just not going to notice that like the composition of this photo is the same as that one, you know.
David, were you part of that conversation? I was comparing Conan the Barbarian number 44 to the way it was reprinted in Dark Horse and the colorist.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That's
awful. A perfect example of it, because what happens with John draws it is he just does these like almost a tiny little triangle for the female's nose. And the colorist rendered the nose bridge, rendered the nostril flares with just color over top of it, because it was a recoloring in the Dark Horse reprint. And it was just like, it turned to this girl from looking like she was like an early 20s, late teens to like a 40-year-old woman just by like delineating the bridge of her nose in it. And it was like, how can this, if this is two worlds, this guy's world of how you color is never going to grasp this way of drawing. John's drawing is completely outside of that whole story, and it didn't work at all. And I just couldn't find an example that was more clear of my theory or my thesis.
Yeah. See how, I mean, this is very, very like, I like the word rendered. There's just a lot to it. Yeah. Even though there's not a lot of.
What's wrong with her eyes?
Oh, I lost.
Oh, there's the face again. Yeah.
Yeah.
Look at her. Her eyes are messed up there.
I think pretty sure he traced a photo, so they're probably kind of normal.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a thing that's true. You know, people don't recognize how often that real from a photo looks totally distorted in a drawing.
Yes.
It doesn't make sense sometimes, because you can look really far and have your pupils turned so far off your eye, or sometimes in a photo the pupils look like they're in different places. And I know this for a fact because I've spent a lot of time doing portraits. You can get it deadly exactly where it is in the photo, and you're looking at it in the painting, you're like, that looks cross-eyed, because we don't see it like a painting and a drawing as the same as we see a photo. We don't look at them the same. It's a whole different way of aesthetic. That's what it is.
And we have slight asymmetries and things like that. One of the things I noticed with a lot of artists, and this is again why Jesse's very good at this stuff, is they don't get facial proportions at all. Like they just like practice drawing Spider-Man or something, and then they didn't really get the idea that like there's supposed to be an eye space between your eyes.
Yeah.
You know, that the eyes are supposed to line up with the top of the ear. So and you stop and you're like, there's an uncanny valley effect to a lot of modern art, because maybe the eyes are slightly too close together and then they look ugly.
Mhm.
They look like somebody they look like Henry Rollins or somebody. Like their eyes are too close together.
Yeah,
Real people have eyes sometimes that are too close together.
sure, sure. And eyes that are crooked, but you kind of go for an idealized version, right? This is an argument I get on with Twitter all the time. I mean, I've unfollowed guys and I've blocked people because of the way that they argue. It's just it's so like mono driven. Like they've got this mindset that everything should be the way it is in reality. I'm like, look, dude, like you're looking at a picture and you're putting something in a picture means that you're putting in it for people to observe. If it's reflective of reality, that's just naturalism, and that's not an ideal. So why we have these sort of measurements is to make an idealized face that's based on the perfect form. And I have a video about this, about Sophia Loren and how her face lines up identically with John Buscema's faces. It's her form, and the way that the features are related to one another is exactly like his faces. It's not that nobody looks like this, and it's not that everybody looks like this. It's the idealized.
Yeah, it's an ideal versus the real. To put this in literature terms for people who aren't, maybe aren't into the visual space, realism became a trend in the 19th century. The point of realism was to write about and to include in your writing things which are mundane or not part of idealism. So you might write a scene where somebody urinates, for example.
Yeah.
Now, in The Hobbit, or The Lord of the Rings, there's never a single mention of sex or defecation. It's never mentioned. The hobbits, for all we know, don't puke.
Maybe they don't.
Well, of course they do, but why would Tolkien spend time going, Sam, hold on, Frodo, we need to stop because I need to take a whiz. Oh, that's a good idea, Sam. I need to take a whiz too. How about we pee into each other's piss? Oh, that's funny, right? They wouldn't write
sounds
that.
Like a George R.R. Martin story.
Yeah, you might write that as a comedy, and it depends where you want to emphasize those things, because I've done it in different ways as a writer. But the ideal is presenting the character, the abstraction of the character, who they are in an ideal sense, rather than like showing their ugly flaws or things like that. If you're thinking about, say, from a Shakespeare play, you don't have enough time to have a bunch of realist stuff. You have to paint everything with big strokes and show the flaws in big, important ways that can be done efficiently. So idealism versus realism, you have the same thing in literature. And you'll know really quickly, if you read something like Stephen King, the reason Stephen King books are thick with less story than Michael Moorcock is Michael Moorcock is writing not just idealist, but surreal. And Stephen King is writing realism. The characters stop pee and poop. Character, he mentions what hands characters jerk off with, things like that. So that's part of his approach, is that it's completely, all the real parts of a person. And people like that. People do like that. I have nothing against that. There's a lot of things by Stephen King I like. So I think it makes for characters that people can get very attached to, because the character feels real. The character pees and poops like I pee and poop. And that's something, or there's something, you have an opportunity to show more funny things, because funny things tend to happen with mundane things. Oh, he was squatting down. Oh, we need to find the river quick. Frodo. Oh, what happened, Sam? I was popping a squat and I slipped and fell in my own poo. You're right. We need to find the river quick. We gotta wash the poop off. Now that could be very funny, but that wouldn't fit in Lord of the Rings. It might fit in a Stephen King version of Lord of the Rings if he were to write it like that.
It's like he hits with a hammer. Stephen King. I remember you've read The Running Man.
Yeah.
So you remember that part of the end is quite different from the movie, where he's in the airplane and they're going to crash it down there, and his stomach has been shot, and it says, I almost remember it verbatim. I was about 16 when I read it, and it shocked me so much. I actually had to put the book down. That's how sensitive I was as a kid. And it was like a gray sausage of intestine looped out from my stomach and hooked onto the handrail behind me. And I vaguely felt like I was shitting myself. And I went, I'm at the end of this book, and I put it down. I could not believe it.
That's pretty gross. Yeah.
It was like a hammer, right? So that's what Stephen King, I think, has got as his kind of one trick. He pulls it again and again. It's a hammer.
Yeah. And I will say that, so Stephen King, he's more versatile than people give him credit for, because they tend to think of him as just a horror writer, and he can actually write lots of things. But there's a book called it's called Eyes of the Dragon.
Yeah, I read that one too.
Now, it's written mostly in an idealized fantasy style, But then there's these moments where, like, the king is drinking a draught to make him, like, be able to have sex with his wife or something, right? Where it's like you just can't help but plug in something that's a little too gross that just like pops out of that story. It breaks the immersion of a more classic fantasy setting. And I actually do like that book, but there's plenty of moments in that book where it's like King just can't help but be Stephen King for at least a little scene, and have a guy have to drink a draught that Flag made him so he can bang his wife.
I don't remember that. I think that I didn't like it as much because I was looking for something to do with the Gunslinger. I think I'd read Gunslinger Part 1, like the first one. And I knew that the Eyes of the Dragon was related to it some way, and I didn't quite dig it. Plus, it wasn't really a fantasy story. It was kind of a weak version of a fantasy.
Yeah, I got maybe 50 pages into that, and I was like, I don't even like this.
So, yeah, I don't remember much of it.
Yeah, it's very different than it's very different than like his normal stuff.
Yeah.
So, anyway, that's Stephen King. That's realism versus idealism. And I think when you're doing, say, a pen and ink drawing, the point is to represent what is important about the image. You're always doing an idealized abstraction on some level, unless you're trying to make it completely photorealistic, as you would put in every single detail. Yeah.
And there's a thing here that I'd like to give a tip of the hat to John, because you were a great guy to work with. I've had a lot of times when I worked with people, and it's been, marginally good and partially good, but you've been always good the whole way through. And I think because when we started out, we had a really frank discussion, and you said, I want to do this the Marvel method. And I was like, this guy gets it, because here's what it works out to. I think that both of you guys are very fine writers. And I think that you maybe have different opinions about this, but I want to say, from the point of view of an artist, when you're being dictated to about what to draw, you're hearing from a person who's not a specialist in visuals, how to draw visuals. And it's like, well, actually, I'm the specialist in visuals, not you. And so when you said to me, do this Marvel method, I was like, I'm with you 100%. And you just took what I did and you wrote beautifully to it. And it's the way that Stan and John worked. And John would say, I would never do another way, because it's the best way to write, because it's relying on him.
It scared me to do that, Jesse.
Did it?
Sure.
So if you guys don't know what the Marvel method is, one of you want to give me the Marvel method? I know what it is, but
sure. I'll talk about it. Basically, you give a plot synopsis to the artist, and then you say it's going to be this many pages, and the artist actually gets to break down how that's going to be visually represented. Now, I did a little bit of a modified version of this, because Stan Lee would just give a paragraph.
Yeah.
And he'd just be like, all right, the Crusader guy, he's just going to fight the Demon King here and have fun with that. Click. And then the artist would make up everything, right? So I did a modified version of this where I broke it down by page, because I actually I do know story-wise, like, the beats that you want to hit and the pacings you want to hit are like going to be page 1 this, page 2 and 3 need to be this scene, so that way it was a little bit more than Stan would have given. But you don't tell him what to draw the panel. So this last panel here, Jesse just makes this whole page up. I don't go panel 3, the Demon King holding a ball with a blah 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 blah. So that's the difference between a standard script and the Marvel method right there. Now, I've never done the Marvel method before, Jesse, and it's because I've been scared of it. Most of the artists I've worked with, are like from the Philippines or Brazil or something. So, when there's a language barrier, I'm way too scared to do that, especially. And then secondly, you never know if an artist, how good they are, because they could just, you're really putting a lot of trust at that point.
Of course.
But after talking on the phone with Jesse about the story, made it a lot easier to kind of get that, because we were on the same page, and we knew we were on the same page from the get-go.
Yeah. And I've got a lot of experience with theater. I used to be a theater guy, and comics are kind of they're a lot like theater. It's theatrical. Like, you got to have these moments where things happen. And I've dealt with guys that didn't understand the drama of a page turn. John knew how to lay out the book so that the pages happened at particular moments. And he was saying, and they have to work in sets of 2. And I was like, yeah, I totally know that. And he went, oh, that's great. I've talked to guys that don't know that. I'm like, they're just drawers. They
just draw. They don't even think about it. Yeah.
They're just drawers. And I'm not a drawer. I'm an illustrator. And I think a lot about it, because it's like staging a theatrical piece or like a little bit of a kind of a paced moment. There's a drama in how you pace the pages, and there's a drama in how the panels flow. And I think that it's a lost thing. Would you say it's a lost? I don't read comics as much as you guys anymore. I stopped reading in the 90s, frankly. So I don't know if it's lost, but it seems like it is to me.
I really stopped reading in the 90s, but it wasn't for these reasons. This is kind of, you know, putting it together after the fact. I stopped reading in the 90s because I just stopped being interested in what Marvel and these companies
right.
Other than certain things at Dark Horse Comics.
Dark Horse does a lot of cool stuff, and they still do, and that's where you'll get the interesting stuff. But yeah, Marvel and DC, just the pacing of comics these days is just atrocious. I usually only review books I like, but I got a book kind of not knowing what it was going to be about. It's the Scarlet Witch, because the whole WandaVision thing, I was watching it and I just was curious about the character. And I went in and, oh my gosh, I have to savage this book because the writing on it is so atrocious. Like you said about the layout, like there's one issue of it that stands out to me. You know, those nine panel pages, like it's pretty standard, but it's just faces and that's it. And they're just talk. See, they not only did that one time during the issue of 22 pages, they did it 3 times. Just slowing down the entire book throughout the entire time. And I looked and there were only 2 pages of action in the entire issue. And I'm just like, this is a freaking superhero book. Like, how do you have 3 full talkie pages of just heads and only 2 pages of action in the entire book? It's crazy.
It's like there's Bendis pages, man. They just,
yes.
Now, Greg Land is probably a great artist for that. He's like, yeah, hell yeah, I'll do a 12, 15 panel page of faces. He's just going to trace every single one. I'm not trying.
And they're sort of the same each picture. Like they're just maybe an eyebrow different. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Person, it's because writers now, Marvel switched what the Marvel method was back after they had that bankruptcy thing in the 90s. So Marvel's gone through several things. The old Marvel method's what John and Jesse were talking about. Basically, Stan would give a synopsis of what's going to happen, and Steve or John or whoever would draw it, and then Mad Lib style, Stan Lee would go through and put the dialogue all over it. And Stan was like, "This is a brilliant thing because first of all, we do it quickly, but second of all, depending on the way the artist draws the page, I realized like I could add something in here. There's a space that I could fill up with like some kind of little quip, something funny. Like I could add all these things in the spaces. It just somehow cutting that down and limiting it made him add all kinds of other little quips that otherwise weren't conceived of. So he would write in the dialogue kind of Mad Lib style to fill out the story. And that's the way that the books were made. And it was really efficient and it was very successful. In the 80s, I want to say the late 80s, it started moving over towards like I don't know what to call it, like the phenom. You had guys like who made Todd McFarlane and who else am I thinking of here? Everyone makes fun of him, but I actually think he's kind of
Rob Liefeld. Rob Liefeld.
So you start having guys that are writing and drawing the comic as I don't know what to call it, auteurs of the comics industry. And then comics were blowing up and people were getting a lot of money for like old comics. People were buying all those different variant issues and it kind of killed the industry. Marvel was basically bankrupt. I don't remember what year they went bankrupt, but they switched over to a writer-led style where the writer's basically writing everything out and your artists are basically hired labor that, fill in the pages that the writer wrote. And so it's trying to be a visualization of what a novelist would write. Yeah. But something I've noticed with most writers for Marvel and DC, I'm just going to say it, they're bad. They're bad writers, or they write the same thing over and over again. These are people whose novels would not be good, who could not hack it in the novel space because they don't have enough of a grasp of how to write good dialogue. Mainly because most of the writing in a comic book is dialogue. And
and a lot of time in these dialogue spots, they just want to rant about some particular social issue or something like that. Yeah. And so they stop everything and just do that. And it's like, same thing in the Scarlet Witch thing I was just reading, like every other page was like, I'm a woman and you're a man and I've been oppressed and you need to shut up. And it's like, nobody talks like that in real life, except for some blue hairs on Twitter. But in reality, I never get talked to like that. So when you see that once, maybe you can forgive it, but then you start reading it and it's in every issue. It's like, whew, it's just painful. And I don't understand how these guys write like this.
Can you guys weigh in this for me? Because something I've noticed from a little bit of a different generation is that when I was reading comics in the 80s, and I have a little monthly thing with my pal from the 80s where we read some issues from the Bronze Age, which we missed. The comics have a lot of writing in them, but it's not ranting. Like you read Roy Thomas's book or say Doug Munich or something like that, they're long. There's lots and lots of writing in it. And somehow or other, people have interpreted lots of writing as being what you were describing just a minute ago, these 9-panel faces where people are just this endless diatribe. And I've got this weird middle ground between it where I think those super sparse comics where there's like a panel where he says, let's go or something like that. I mean, that's too little. I feel like there should be more, like the way Roy Thomas used to write. And he'd have a panel which would say, and at that moment, Conan looked down, and in the pit below him, he saw the smoke rising, and he saw that there was a demon returning. And Conan would say, "Crom." You know, there's like 50 words in one panel. So where's the line between that, and why does that happen? That people interpret long writing means bad, because long writing was good in the 80s.
It can be, but
it's
I don't know.
it's where you choose to put the emphasis. Yeah, that's a good point, because like long writing doesn't necessarily mean bad, but if you're going to fill a whole page of panels of people talking, you're not working in the medium.
Right.
You're not.
Yeah,
you're not
it is a talking deal. I feel like
it's captions,
pages. I feel like pages start to look weird if you don't have some sort of dialogue in almost every panel. So I don't like to have a page with like, you know, one little piece of dialogue on it and that's it, if that's possible.
Yeah,
but I like to let the art breathe. And the other thing you mentioned.
I'll interject. A lot of writers, I think now today, don't use the prose part. You can have captions and stuff in comics. You can describe things or say things in prose and comics.
Ignore that as much as possible. I try to set the scene like, you know, 1099 AD. Like this page, where the top page here, the first panel will say 1099 AD. Not that one. That one. 1099 AD. Next one down. There we go. The one we were on. That top panel right there. Because that's our first page, I think. It says 1099 AD. The, you know, Pyrenees Mountains, you know, right after the Crusade or something like that. And then we go in to describe his battles of the Crusade in the next panels. But as far as like the if like say panel 3, like, so I wouldn't do a dialogue box saying and then he stabbed him in the gut, like Roy Thomas would do. Because what I found when I'm reading those books from the 60s and 70s, Stan Lee, Roy Thomas, I actually skip over a lot of the captions when I'm reading through it, just because it's like I do.
You're dead wrong.
I skip over them. I really do.
Shame on you. Shame on you.
Because you don't need them. I already know he's stabbing the guy in the gut. I really do.
That's the beautiful prose that he's throwing in there. I mean, that's getting into the stuff that's really what Roy Thomas can flex his muscles on. I think that's wrong.
I think if you want to use captions to their best ability in a visual medium, you should describe things which are not purely communicated through a visual representation.
That's what I'm saying. Sorry, Jesse.
He's like
that I agree with. I agree with that. You don't want to say restate the picture, like, you know, I'm talking about like it's the omniscient third position, the omniscient third. That's what I'm talking about. I wish I had a comic next to me. I could read you a phrase. I mean, they're beautiful phrases that he comes up with.
You know, it could be something that's like blood and bile or something like that. Because if you have an expression that like indicates a smell or a different sensation, that's part of that. It's like, you know, the smell of blood and bile, the beautiful taste of victory or something like that. That this might be him like coming over the walls of Jerusalem or something like that.
What makes you think this then? Because that's actually something really interesting to me. Because as far as I'm concerned, I think that might be our age difference. I that's the only thing I can attribute it to, because I think that form of a comic is so utterly set in the way that we still tell stories. We tell stories like that throughout various genres. So when it gets taken out because of something that is a fad, it seems to me like a step away from the very standards of storytelling. It's as old as any children's story.
I guess. I don't know. I just like to let the art breathe a little more because I want to look at the art. That's my thought. You know. I don't know.
I think you can do it, but yeah, it's an option. It's one of it's another tool. I don't look at things as like, you know, shouldn't, you know, shouldn't do. It's more like it's an option. Even when it comes to modern colors or something that I don't love usually in the medium. It's an option if you want to use that. It's a tool. There's lots of tools at your disposal with comics. And I think a lot of people ignore, say, prose or just captions or something like that, because like it's a visual medium and therefore it should be like a movie, and therefore everything should be done through dialogue. Most of the work is going to be done through dialogue anyway, whether that's a novel or it's a comic or it's a movie. Dialogue is where most of the story takes place. That's just reality. Most good writers will tell you that and will know that. And it's all about the dialogue. And the truth is, even if you're looking at a novel, a lot of readers will skip long sections of prose and just skip to the dialogue. They do that. And so if you're writing something that lots of people are going to skip, maybe you should skip writing it too. That's some of my thoughts there.
You know, it's funny because what you're saying, John, is very interesting to me, because I actually think that I skip looking at the pictures when I'm reading a comic. I think I'm looking. Yeah, well, I don't skip it. I glance at it, sort of. It has to fit the picture. It has to fit what's going on, and it shouldn't be confusing. But when I look at the comic, I have to say that I'm really in a different paradigm, because I don't read new comics. I don't know what they're like. But when I read an 80s comic like ROM or something like that, written by Bill Mantlo, they're all the same. I mean, the Contest of Champions was written by Bill Mantlo in 1982. It's full of captions. And the thing is, it takes you 30 to 40 minutes to read it. Or Master of Kung Fu, written by Doug Munch. It's like super, super full of writing. And I think I look less at the picture and more at the caption. Isn't that weird?
I don't know. Yeah, maybe it is just a generational thing. I don't know. I'm looking through our issue 2 right now, and I guess I don't have omniscient captions or anything like that usually, but I do fill in some of the pages where, like, in terms of art, I do fill in with thought balloons. You don't see a lot of thought balloons in modern comics these days either, and so I did add a lot of thought balloons in that area where he's kind of traveling by himself,
Cool.
which adds a little bit to that, because you get his perspective. And I like to dive into. I don't know. My whole deal is I like to dive into perspective, not omniscience. I want to feel like in this. I want to feel what Domingo's thinking here, and I want to know like how he's reacting to this.
Yeah.
For the immersion's sake, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. That's cool. That's really cool.
So I don't know. That's my style. Hopefully you like it enough to
that
you're happy with it. So
no, it's been wonderful. When I looked what you did, and I think that the pacing that you took from me, and you took the words that sort of fit the captions or the panels just perfectly. I thought it was wonderful.
Cool. All right. Well, if it works, we're happy. There's one spot. So the Marvel Method, there was one spot in this entire book where we had a miscommunication between what you thought was happening in the thing and what I thought was happening in the thing.
Yeah,
that was very fun. That's just one. That's pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
That's a testament to your storytelling with the art, that it matched very well exactly what I was thinking, even, just and laid out very, very clearly. So yeah, good stuff.
It's a hard thing to do, and I was really I was going to leave it, I was going to leave it because I'm like, it totally worked what you did, actually. And it didn't actually not make sense. And I thought, maybe I'll just say it just for the sake of it. I don't know. I think I even caged it, Joe, by saying, and it doesn't even matter. You could leave it the way you left it. But
you did. You were super nice. But I chalked that up to you being Canadian. So.
Oh, is that nice? I thought it was really kind the way that you responded. You said, no, that makes better sense. And I went, okay. It was about that panel where the footprints were, right?
That's correct. Yeah, just one panel.
Yeah.
Cool. All
right, so we had a question. Someone wanted me to ask this question. If you were to have one of your comics made into a JRPG, what would they pick? Now Jesse doesn't do JRPGs. Jesse actually designs actual RPGs.
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
he has one called Pangea, which we didn't really. Yeah, I got too much crazy stuff ended up happening over the last couple months, but yeah. So Jesse is is a game designer in addition to a musician and a comic artist and a YouTuber. In fact, I should.
Yeah.
Wait, do you make the rules like battle rules and things like that?
Yeah, I invented it. Basically, it was like something that I started in about 1990 because I was angry at the way that Dungeons and Dragons in second edition was sort of moving away from the game that I used to. And plus, there was so many things in D&D Part 1 that I just thought didn't make sense. And I've come to actually mellow out in my days, and I actually like first edition Dungeons and Dragons quite a bit now, but in those days I wanted to make up something different and a little more historical, because I'm really interested in historical things. So that's what I did. I made it up. Took me 20 years or 30. A JRPG video game. Actually, I did assets for a side-scrolling arcade-style video game, and it's called Yonder Wild, and it's about a kobold who's trapped in this tree world, and he moves up and up the different levels. It's not been produced yet, and the guy that's programming it has done such a fabulous job with it. It's like a side-scroll done in the style of Rankin Bass paintings. Do you know those styles, guys? Rankin Bass. The Hobbit style from the video game.
I love
yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I love the Hobbit. It's one of me and my son's favorite little cartoons to watch.
Yeah, so I got this job to illustrate the assets for that, and that's coming out. But one of our comics made into a JRPG video game. I don't know. I mean, there's some. I've done a space opera comic that was it was actually stumbled on account of the production was belabored by loss of staff a lot of the time. You know that in these independent comics, these people kind of come and go, and that puts a lot of a different taste into the comics kind of overall tone. And but it was a very interesting story set in a bunch of people that were going back to fight aliens on their own planet. So it's like we're going to bring the war to them. That would be a kind of a cool video game.
Yeah, sounds cool. For me, it'd be probably not my comics, but my Justified novel series. I just think that has that like sort of fast-paced, hard-hitting thing that I'd like to have Final Fantasy music playing in the background and have the laser swords going. It seems cool. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Laser swords.
Laser swords are awesome.
Yeah, someone asked me this about my novels, and I thought, it'd probably be Needle Ash because it'd be a tactical RPG though. It'd be a tactics game.
Oh, David, I got to bring up the fact that I brought the Mage Core into my Dungeons and Dragons game. So
yeah,
the players loved it, dude. That was a brilliant idea you had.
Yeah, I was trying to think, how would Magic be integrated into it, and I thought it'd be kind of like artillery. It'd have its own designated role, and you'd have to have your mages there to counter the other mages, and of course Magic needs to be pretty darn rare. If everybody can do Magic, it becomes too much to think about warfare. This is something I guess about Harry Potter, that what would wizard warfare be like? It would be atrociously destructive.
Can you imagine?
Kill somebody with a word? Get out of here. That'd be crazy.
Yeah, that's cool.
So, in an army of thousands of people, there's a couple of wizards. There's a little core of wizards that can do some massive damage, and you got to figure out how to deal with them.
Mm-hmm. John, I've got a question for you regarding DEUS VULT.
Yeah, sure. What's up?
Here's my question. So we put this thing out, and it's moving along. It's early in its run, so it's got a long ways to go. What degree does it have to be a success for the both of us to come to terms with the fact that we're going to make another book?
That's a great question. I want you to get paid at least a decent rate art-wise, which I think. Let me kind of math what's going to be a decent rate art-wise.
Thank you, Scott.
So there's that. And once we're there, like I honestly think, at least on my end, I'm seeing this as a very viable, interesting property, because I think we're going to hit 20K on this at least.
Wouldn't that be something?
I think at least. And at that point, that becomes my this then becomes my second most successful property to Flying Sparks. So that's pretty cool. And I think that when people read this, they're going to be so happy that the next one's going to actually do better. So that's going to be I'd be happy with that. So I think if we hit 20, I'm in for a next one. So if it's worth your while at 20, which I think it should be at that point, then we'll do it. And I already talked to you about making like maybe miniatures and like things like that. So if you actually know how to design rules for these things, my friend, we might have something more interesting here than just a comic book coming up soon.
So I take this Pangea and I just take the title and I make it Deus Vult.
Right.
It's an
Right.
excellent.
I mean, you could call it the Pangea system.
Yeah.
Pangea system, Deus Vult. And here's the cool part. We have all the art already done that we could source and put into the thing.
It's so brilliant. It's so brilliant. It's brilliant. But yeah, so the thing that I when I took this project on with you, I was really interested in getting together because I like you personally and I knew you, but you had this vision, and the vision comes from real theology, as far as I can tell. I'm not as incredibly knowledgeable about that as the two of you guys are. But when you talked about the different dimensions and the different planes that this story is encompassing, I've got
which doesn't get mentioned in the book, by the way. This is just my background notes. This is something that people don't realize. I make background notes to build worlds, and I don't put them in the book. But it's there, so the rules are there, so everything will feel right once we get to the sequels and things like that. But this is not actually in the book. But yes, go ahead.
yeah. Well, I think Mina makes a mention of it. She says, "Don't you know something about the different?" This, I think, in her first dialogue when they meet in the tunnel, I think she says something like, "Don't you know of the 7 dimensions or the 7 planes or something like that?"
Oh, she might. Okay.
It might.
I might have tagged a little thing in there just to do it. Okay, cool. I don't remember what I write.
It's totally fine. All I wanted to ask was with these different planes, that's a lot of landscape that you can fill out. And
yes, and we don't necessarily just have to have one book per plane either. There can be different regions in the different planes. Also, there's a long way we can go with it. But in my head, I naturally just build a trilogy for things. So it's like you notice that this book's in 3 parts, right? So I like to break it into 3s because I think that's a very good compartmentalization. And then I always build the trilogy just so, because people like trilogies for one. But that way when I'm doing one, I can layer little stuff in there that like is for the next couple when it gets bigger. But at the same time, we don't have to do it, right? So I try to make a complete story. That's the other thing no modern comic person does these days. There's a complete story here. So if we don't go ahead, this will feel perfect. If we do go ahead, then everybody's going to be extremely happy, I think. So yeah.
That's a really good point. It's a full story.
Yeah. That's I don't know.
So
cool.
I want to point this out. Like, okay, so I'm going to, while I'm plugging this, first of all, I bought into this. So I bought one of the splash pages.
Yes.
Thanks, David.
You can't get any big Jesse art. I think is the cover still available?
I can't believe that.
Yeah,
this is so cheap.
You can buy this cover, so you can, if you like this painted cover, you can buy the painting.
Jesse, you underpriced yourself for an oil painting. That's freaking great. That is so cheap. Yeah, you shouldn't have done that.
It is cheap. All the art was cheap.
Yeah, you can get this painting. So a couple of things. First of all, John always ships a complete story, and he and I agree on this, that if you buy a book, it should have an ending. So when you get to the end, you feel like I've read a story and I'm happy with it. And I know
that is so good, guys.
I have a Cosmic Warrior sitting around here somewhere, and my son really liked it, by the way.
Awesome. That's good to hear.
So it has
book 3's coming out soon. The trilogy will be complete.
Middle, and end. So when I grew up, I would buy a comic and I get to the end of the comic and now the story was done. There was occasionally you had a 2-parter, but even if you had a 2-parter, you'd have some kind of conclusion in that first one and then like a setup for the next one. At some point it became this 6-issue thing where everything was like 6 issues or 12.
And then those middle issues were just train wrecks every single time because there's nothing happening.
Yeah. Just be a bunch of nothing. And then you'd be like, I guess I got to wait another month to see if something happens for the next, the next issue. I like stories that have beginning, middle, end. John usually ships stories that have beginning, middle, end. So if you buy a comic issue, you're going to get a complete story like you would in the old days. This is also true of John's novels. So if you buy, for instance, for Steam and Country, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end to the story. Even though it's part of a series, you don't get to the last book and be like, well, I have to get the next book. because it just doesn't resolve anything.
You do later in the series, but
It's the end of a book. The other thing is, I don't buy into a lot of crowdfunding comics, and the reason is because a lot of people do not do fulfillment well or at all. People are still waiting for that Crimson Cock book. They've been waiting for like 3 years. They're going to wait another 2 years. It's already in Walmart, and they're still not going to get their. It's not going to get their Crimson Rooster book. So I got really turned off to crowdfunding in general over the years because people don't fulfill. John actually will fulfill the crowdfunding, and he will send out the books.
Yeah,
So
this is my 10th campaign book in 3 years.
Yeah.
So I get them out because I got to get the next one going, because my next artist is waiting for funds for the next one. I got to make sure it's going. Yeah. And I got to make sure all these people get money and stay happy so they keep working with me.
Yeah. John, on time and like actually giving people what they wanted. So I've noticed something with a lot of crowdfunding. I feel like comic books are worse than average, but it's not just comics. Back in the day, everybody was kickstarting something. It would come out way after you bought into the Kickstarter, like, years later. If it was an invention, the people would use the Kickstarter funds to design the invention that they proposed and then sell the patent to the Chinese and then walk away and never give you your product, things like that. Or you have things like Star Citizen will Star Citizen ever come out? We don't know.
It's in alpha.
It's been in alpha for like 6 years though, dude. Beta would be in beta for 6 years. Maybe my grandkids will get to play Star Citizen. Star Citizen comes out, like, why would we want to play this? We're already traveling in the stars.
Yeah. You'll read it when we're on Mars.
Right? Mars, Grandpa.
Yeah.
Yes, James Montoya, what is on screen is an oil painting, and you can buy the oil painting. It does not have the logo on it. Yeah, we should also say that I did approach our good friend David Stewart here to do our logo. Did we already talk about that before I was here?
Yeah, we did, but say it again.
Good. Yeah,
he did a
David Stewart did our beautiful logo here, and so he did a great job. And of course, you guys have watched his cover design videos, and that's why I'm like, David, do our logo. And I haven't paid you for that.
Yeah, whatever.
Okay, well, I got to pay you for that because that's not right. I feel bad.
Yeah, it doesn't have the text, and it's slightly different dimension, because I had this as a painting, and then we formatted it later for the print size, which it wasn't actually started out as. It was just a painting I was working on, and we changed it because it was barely started. It basically had a landscape, and that was all. And so it actually has a slightly different dimension, but it's all that you see. There's nothing missing from the painting. It's just slightly shorter. I extended the top.
Oh yeah, that's right. I remember now.
Yeah.
Cool.
But, I think it looks great.
It's good stuff. Where were we? There was one thing. Oh yeah, the big thing about crowdfunding on this. That's one of the things I talked with Jesse about on the phone, like right away at the beginning. I'm like, Jesse, we have to finish this before I even crowdfund, because you talked about having an indie comic project where like the teams change in the middle of the book and things like that. Yeah. I have seen way too many books like that, and there's nothing worse for me than seeing a change in the art in the middle of a book. And so I'm just not even willing to do it. So I'm just like, we get it done, then we can do it. So we have this 100% done, except for the pages where we have made room to draw backers into the book, which there's one slot left on that. There's
scroll down, David. It's like near the bottom.
It is.
Oh, up from there.
It's in the goals, obviously. Little higher up. Wine trip with JDA. Everybody should be doing that. I don't know what's going on.
You and me can just do that.
We can, yeah, and you don't have to pay me to do that.
Roll up one more. One more.
That's what I'll do. I'll take you to Napa.
There it is.
For your logo.
Drawn into the book.
Yeah, so we have one more left, and this is going to fill out those slots. You get your likeness in there, or a likeness of a loved one if you want, and it's cool. So
you're going to appear, and I can actually already tell. Shall I tell, or shall I keep it secret?
Go for it.
Okay, so you're going to appear in a monastery at the end. You'll either be like a monk, or you're going to be a nun standing there, or maybe even a caryatid or a painting on the wall or something of that nature.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Can you see it, John? That'd be pretty darn cool. That'd be like
book two. We have to. But for book two, I guess we'll already talk about this. We'll have to do a tier where you can get killed in the book, though, because
Brian
like that. People.
like super popular, sold out immediately. People are like, I get killed. Can I pay extra for an extra gruesome death?
Yes.
Oh my God. You guys are blowing my mind. When John told me about running drawn in the book, he said, what do you think about? Should we have like 10? I'm like, 10? I don't want 10 people in the book, but now I see what you're doing. This is about people wanting to be in it because it makes them like feel super excited. I'm like,
it's pretty cool. Yeah. I mean, well, it's sweet. You have an artist of your caliber draw like somebody's likeness in the book. That's great. And if they can get killed in the book, I mean, I think that's worth double. So it's worth pretty great.
It was like our
you gotta have 3 tiers. It's got to be like be drawn in the book.
Be drawn in the book.
Be killed in an extremely gruesome fashion. And then then the $1,000 tier, be eviscerated by
head cut off. Like our little our COVID book that we made where I did your guys' pictures as portraits on each of those pages. That was hilarious.
I think I have it. I'll pull it up here.
David, that pose of you with your finger on your face like that, I was like, this looks exactly like David.
I sit here like this. That's true.
What showed up at my house? Let's check. Let's take it. This just showed up here.
I have it over here somewhere.
Oh, yes. Oh, crud. It's my Star Trek graphic novel collection. Here we go.
Very nice.
There you are.
Like to someone else draw
that.
Oh, yeah, I do sit like that a lot.
Yeah. That was funny.
Let's pull this down. There's John.
I got another package of comics. This is exciting. This is I got my shipment for my Star Trek graphic novel collection. So so I'm gonna show you guys this real quick because this is awesome. The spines form a picture.
Oh, yeah.
And they have every Star Trek graphic novel ever made in this. So I'm a big Star Trek guy. So
isn't that amazing? How many are there? Like 50 of them or something?
Oh, we lost the audio.
Oops. There's 140 total. I get 6 a month. So
wow.
But I'm at about 50 right now.
Yes, because they chose to mute themselves. I got this.
John muted himself.
I did by accident. I was moving my laptop around, so I clicked it. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I should start giving away comic books on these streams to like people who back.
Yeah. I'm looking at the time, guys, and I'm thinking we're about out of time.
Cool.
I'm gone for about 2 hours. But anyway, you can back it here. It's DEUS VULT. Hopefully you've enjoyed our conversation. I have skin in the game because I did design the logo, but I also bought into it. So I also put my money into it.
Yes.
So you can guess that I actually care about something if I'm willing to pay for it. And I wouldn't have done that if I didn't trust John to actually fulfill the campaign. Like I said, a lot of people who are new to comics, I wouldn't crowdfund them simply because I don't have faith in them to actually deliver their products. This is a problem with a lot of indie comics. I don't really know why it is, but it is. And it's a problem on crowdfunding in general. So that's actually something that I think is worth
Jesse
noting.
Dipped out too early.
Are you?
I'm here. I'm here again.
Okay.
It's my VPN. It's causing me problems these days. I don't know why.
Yeah, I usually have to turn mine off to do YouTube stuff, or it thinks like I'm being hacked.
Yeah, I just turned it off. I was going to just ask John, in terms of the campaign, you've been around the block so many times. Can you, just for my sort of personal satisfaction, give a guess where you think the course of it's going to be? Is it going to be slow for the next weeks, or is it? My wife noticed that it's raising like pretty consistently the same amount every day, although it's slower than the first day.
The first day, my whole crew comes in and goes right, because I've got a newsletter and it goes out right. Usually day 2 is about half of day 1, and then day 3 is about half of day 2, which we hit that. And then usually it dies out pretty good by this time. So I'm watching this and I'm watching it not die out by this time. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, whoa, this is actually kind of uncharted territories. I don't know why that's the case. Well, I guess I do. I'm
because you're on my show.
I'm on David V. Stewart's show.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah,
exactly what happens. So, but yeah, I'm running around to streams every single day. So I'm hustling hard through this, and this This is what I do. People don't hear from me for a couple months. I'm working, I'm making my books, and then I get my next book out, and then suddenly it's campaign time, and it's like I'm everywhere all day, every day, and that's what I do.
And this is also a unique product too. Is that most people doing comics? I mean, unless they're Matt Krotz, who actually did the colors on this comic, and he has his Roman era comic,
Curie,
yes, which is good.
Which is a great one. So I recommend that one too. I've had him on the show for that. There's not very many things that are outside of like the cape genre. So it's really honestly a pretty unique.
And it's a full graphic novel. It's not just like a little thin, thing where you're going to get a nice hardcover out of this for the hardcover backers, which I'm a hardcover type of backer. That's who I am.
I prefer nowadays. I really prefer if they have, if it's like I prefer a hardback if it's something that I really want to hold on to.
Yeah.
But the problem is like we, what Jesse mentioned about the Dark Horse, those Dark Horse recolors is like, at that point you want to get the original floppies because
Interesting. I'll have to compare the Dark Horse recolors to the Marvel reprints that just got done. I don't know if we'll talk about that upstairs. I don't know if they redid the colors or not. But yeah, so I would expect by next week it'll slow down pretty good, and then like the last 7 days it'll pick up like crazy. Like especially the last 2-3 days, it'll go again.
People want to buy in before it goes out.
Right.
So
right.
That's what I would expect. Now, if I can get some big social media influencer to like David here to get the word out and stuff like that, that changes that trajectory a little bit, but. Yeah, that's about typically how it goes. So
okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I want to check where it's at right now. Have you looked at lately?
Yeah, we're at 12,381, 254 backers. My goal is to.
It was at the beginning of the stream. At the beginning of the stream, it was 12,299.
There you go. We got a hundy out of David. It's good time. Good use of time.
Yeah. It's excellent. It's excellent.
So my goal is I will not be happy and I will not rest until I have 402 backers. That's where we're at. So,
and I'm working to sell my remaining pages that I'm offering. I give them a really, really good rate for them. They're worth $60 exclusively. Plus you get the hardcover with it and it's the shipping. So you're getting a comic art for $60, and all of my splashes that David bought are gone. But you can get crazy. You can get a paneled page, and in many cases, you're going to get like 5 drawings.
Are big. They're not. These aren't like little Bendis panels. Like these are the panel pages. I'll put it back up here. The panel pages are big. They look good. They're not. Oops. There we are.
Yeah.
Okay. They look good. They're sizable pages
for $60. That's crazy, and we're going to get Jesse big. So you're going to invest in this now, and like 5-10 years from now, Jesse's going to be so big, he's probably not going to want to talk to David and I. And that's going to be it.
Actually, we'll never be apart. We're going to be together.
Yeah, I have a technical question for Jesse before we go. What size paper do you draw on?
Oh, it's 11 by 17.
11 by 17?
I'll hold one up. Just hang tough.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, I had someone asking me this in the YouTube comments, I don't know, a while back. They're like, hey, I'm going to draw this on regular comic paper, but I'm drawing a manga, and then we're going to print it at this manga size. I'm like, I think that's what most comic artists do is they print it, they draw it the bigger size, and then, prints at a, whatever the comic size is, 7 by 11 or whatever it is.
So so we're printing at 7 by 10, so slightly bigger than a standard comic, just slightly. But the comic art size is much. We could upsize this, do a giant size edition.
Yeah. So this is from book 3. John hasn't even seen this page, probably because it's been just colored. This is where he's fighting the dog.
I can't see it.
It's not clear.
No, David needs to make you big there.
Oh yeah, let me get the biggest. There, we'll do 1, and then we'll have. There we go.
There we go. Sweet.
Yeah, it's big. So these are big pages. They're not like little, you shrink the art down when you make the actual book. Anyway, I had someone on the channel asking about this. Hey, could I do this at 11 by 17? What should I do? It's like, well, you just know that it's going to be a little bit smaller when you print it because it's going to be sized down.
It's easier to size down than it is to size up.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
yeah.
You know, so like if you're putting in tiny, tiny details, they're going to be much tinier when you try to get them.
Yeah. So the other thing I want to point out is that guys that often use these pages, they come with a blue line, but I took this tip from John and he draws on the back. You see, this has got the blue line on the front. You don't want to have a collection of your picture with blue line on it. It looks ugly. So I just do it on the back of it. And so there's no grids or anything on it. That's just my ink laying right on cardstock.
That's awesome.
It's a hard piece of paper. It's not flimsy, and it's going to get mailed flat, not rolled up. That's a really attractive piece that you could put in. It's 4 panels on a page. So that's being sold for $60. It's a good deal.
That's crazy.
They're big clear panels. It's not like a bunch of little traced pages or something like that. So they're big. They look good.
Yeah, and they won't fade either in time because it's India ink, not Sharpie. Sharpie turns green, you know. That's why people that color with Sharpie and the pictures look spoiled after 2 years because it turns green. That's India ink right out of a bottle.
Yeah. I found that with some of my ink drawings that I've pulled them out later. Or, you know, the maps, like if I draw a map on a page, I came back and looked at one of my original maps, and yeah, the ink had all turned kind of a green color.
Yeah, or it turns red sometimes. It's weird. I noticed this in grade 8 art. I'm like, this pen is actually kind of red, and this one's kind of green, and it was really weird. It was a weird moment. If you put a little bit of water on it, you'll instantly see what color it is. It'll bleed. It'll bleed. Yeah.
I had no idea about that.
Yeah, India ink doesn't do that. It's why people that draw with Sharpies and they put their name like as being, you know, Mr. Sharpie. I'm like, yeah, Mr. Don't know what you're doing. That's what it seems like to me.
All right. So anyway, guys, thanks so much for joining me, and everybody in the chat. I do appreciate all the chats and all the fun. You can back DEUS VULT today. I'm going to link it one more time, just in the chat here. It's in the description if you're watching this after the fact. If you're watching video on demand, and you can get keys to prolific creativity if you want something for managing your creative output. That's available right now. I got more books coming this year, new novels and stuff like that. So please do stay tuned for that. You can get on my mailing list at dbspress.com/list. What about you, John? What's your mailing list? I could probably just link it here.
Oh, delarose.com/newsletter would be great. Right. And I've got a YouTube channel too, of course, that I'm building. But the newsletter is more important because
I'll have to find yours too.
Yeah.
But yeah, John has a YouTube channel. I think it's just John Delarose, right?
Yeah, John Delarose. So you can just look me up and easy to go.
Yeah.
I'm going to catch up with you, David. I'm 1/20th of the way.
No, that's great. You're good.
Of course, he'll be double that by the time I get there.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see.
You will.
Eventually you get banned.
God wills it, David.
God wills it.
Okay. All right, guys. I do appreciate it. And we'll see you all next time. Have a great rest of your Saturday. And I do appreciate all the prayers and stuff for my family. I just want to let you guys know that we do appreciate that a lot. So thanks so much. And I will see you guys next time.
See ya.